The range fell silent. All eyes locked on the middle lane, where a quiet woman, hair tucked under an old baseball cap, leveled a rifle like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The guy beside her had just laughed, telling her to step aside and let the pros shoot. Now, his laughter was gone. Her finger brushed the trigger, a single thunderous crack split the air. When the dust cleared, the digital target screen was sparking, shattered clean through. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. And that's how a simple woman humbled an entire firing range in one perfect shot. It started out as an ordinary Saturday. My mom, the woman in this story, had agreed to tag along when I asked if she wanted to visit the new shooting range that opened on the edge of town. She wasn't dressed like a marksman. Worn jeans, faded flannel, hair in a messy braid, just a mom who baked pies and waved to neighbors. But if you'd looked closely, you'd have seen it, the way she glanced at the targets, the subtle check of stance and distance. The range was packed with people trying to impress one another. Loud laughter, competitive bragging, and the sharp scent of gunpowder hung in the air. We found a free lane and unpacked our gear. Almost immediately, a group of guys 2 lanes over noticed her, the kind who believe confidence equals volume. "You sure she can handle that thing?" one of them said loud enough for half the room to hear. Another chuckled, "Careful, ma'am, we don't want any ricochets today." Mom just smiled. "I'll be fine, thank you." Her tone was soft, polite, but firm enough to silence them for a moment. Still, I could feel the tension. Every time she adjusted her rifle, one of them whispered something under their breath. The range officer even seemed skeptical, hovering nearby like he expected her to make a mistake. It wasn't the first time people had underestimated her. And from the way her eyes narrowed slightly before she took her first breath, I knew what was coming, that quiet, unstoppable focus that always made everyone else fade away. Mom lined up her first shot, checking her breathing, slow in, slow out. But before she could pull the trigger, one of the loudest guys, wearing a bright red ear protector, leaned over the divider. "Hey sweetheart, maybe step aside. This isn't the beginner lane." The range went quiet enough to hear the metallic hum of the ventilation fans. I turned, my jaw tightening, but she just blinked at him, expression unreadable. "Step aside," she repeated softly. "Yeah," he grinned. "Let me show you how it's done." He gestured to his friend, who smirked like it was a comedy routine. Mom lowered her rifle. "All right," she said. "You go ahead." The man puffed up proudly, loaded his weapon, and fired off a few rounds. Each shot missed center, close, but never perfect. He looked back at her, waiting for approval. "Not bad," she said, voice calm. "Your grouping could use some work." The guy's grin faltered. "You think you can do better?" She simply tilted her head. "I don't think," she replied. I know. It wasn't arrogance. It was quiet certainty. That kind of tone that doesn't need to prove anything. Everyone nearby had stopped shooting now. You could feel the shift, curiosity mixing with disbelief. To them, she looked like an ordinary woman who probably packed lunches, not rifles. They didn't know who she really was. But I did. And as she picked up the rifle again, I felt that same pulse of electricity I'd seen once before years ago. When I was 10, I found a box in our attic labeled Old Gear. Inside were medals, faded photos, and a service patch I didn't recognize. When I asked, she laughed softly. "That's from another life, honey." Only later did I learn what that meant. Before she met Dad, before the ranch, before the quiet life, my mom had served 12 years as a marksmanship instructor for a federal agency. She trained recruits on precision shooting, wind compensation, and situational awareness. She wasn't just good. She held 3 regional records that still hadn't been broken. But when she left the field, she left it completely. She didn't talk about it, didn't boast. She said, "When you've proved something once, you don't need to prove it again." That was the thing about her, power wrapped in gentleness. Even after retirement, she'd spend hours teaching me patience before skill. "You can't control the target," she'd say. "You can only control your breath." Standing at that firing range years later, watching her face the same arrogance she used to correct in recruits, I realized the men around her were about to get a lesson they'd never forget. She raised her weapon again, posture flawless, eyes steady. The same eyes that once corrected soldiers 3 times her size. And as the fluorescent lights flickered above her, I knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for, not to prove them wrong, but to remind herself who she still was. "All right, ma'am," the guy said, still half laughing, "1 shot. If you beat my score, I'll buy you lunch. But if you don't, you owe me 1. She smiled slightly. "Deal." The others gathered behind, pulling out their phones like this was entertainment. Even the range officer lingered at a distance, clipboard forgotten. Mom placed 1 round carefully. She didn't rush. Her movements were so smooth they looked rehearsed, like a choreographed dance. She adjusted the stock, checked the sight alignment, and then everything about her seemed to go still. No chatter, no laughter, even the loud group fell silent, caught by the shift in atmosphere. She breathed once. Twice. Then the world seemed to shrink into that single heartbeat between inhale and trigger. For a moment, I saw her like her old students must have, a living metronome of precision. "Ready?" the guy asked. She didn't answer. The rifle spoke for her. The explosion of sound echoed through the range, sharper, heavier than anything before. The lights flickered as if startled by the impact. A few people ducked instinctively, others peered through the haze of gun smoke toward the digital target monitor. It sparked once, then twice, and went completely dark. The center of the display was gone, a neat hole burned straight through the circuitry. The range officer ran forward, shouting over the ringing in his ears. "Everyone hold fire." He inspected the monitor, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. How in the world? The shot had landed dead center with such precision that it pierced the reinforced screen, shattering the internal sensors. In 20 years of managing ranges, he said, he'd never seen a display destroyed by accuracy rather than error. The man in the red earmuffs stood frozen, rifle limp at his side. His smirk was gone. Mom calmly set her rifle down, ejected the spent casing, and stepped back like she'd just finished folding laundry. I swear, even the air seemed to hesitate, like everyone was waiting for her to say something. She didn't. She just nodded toward the target. "Guess that's lunch on you," she said softly. It took nearly 10 minutes for the range to reset the equipment. The crowd buzzed like they'd just witnessed a legend. Strangers approached her with questions, half in awe, half an apology. The man who'd mocked her the most finally came forward, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ma'am, I didn't realize." She stopped him with a smile. "Most people don't." He blinked, unsure whether to laugh or nod. "You teach, right?" "Not anymore," she said. "But I remember how." The range officer approached next, grinning. "That shot's going to be talked about for months." Mom chuckled. "Let's hope it doesn't cost you a new monitor every time." We packed up quietly after that, but the atmosphere had changed. Every person in that room watched her with newfound respect, not because of one impressive shot, but because of the grace with which she carried it. On the drive home, I couldn't help smiling. "You showed them." She shook her head. "No. I just reminded them that quiet doesn't mean weak." Later that night, I replayed the moment in my mind, the silence after her shot, the look of pure shock on everyone's face, and the calm pride in hers. We live in a world where people talk too much and listen too little. Where those who brag often get the spotlight, while those who've truly earned respect stay in the shadows. That day at the range was more than a display of skill, it was a lesson. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They're usually the ones who've already conquered battles you can't even imagine. So the next time someone tells you to step aside, remember my mom, the simple woman whose one perfect shot reminded everyone what real confidence sounds like. It doesn't shout. It echoes.